I'd been with Aquaterra Solutions for over 7 years. I'd seen the company grow from a small startup working out of a dingy office to one of the biggest names in tech. I was part of that journey. I had built HYDRONEXUS, the revolutionary hydrogrid control platform that powered everything the company stood for. And yet, as I sat in that full company meeting, my heart began to sink. CEO Benjamin Crow, always so self-assured, stood at the front of the room, and without warning, he dropped the bomb. "Claudia, we've decided to go in a different direction," he said with a smirk that made my stomach turn. "Effective immediately, you are no longer with the company." I stared at him, trying to process the words. Was this a joke? My mind raced. I was the lead architect of HYDRONEXUS. Without me, the whole infrastructure would collapse. Everyone knew it, but no one said anything. I glanced around the room at my colleagues. Some were staring at their phones, pretending not to notice. Others were watching with that look of morbid curiosity, the kind you get when someone else's life is falling apart, and you're too scared to intervene. They didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. Crow slid a thick envelope across the table toward me. "Here's your severance package," he said coolly, his smile barely hiding his satisfaction. I couldn't believe this was happening, not in front of all these people, not after everything I'd done. But there was no point in arguing. I stood up slowly, all the while maintaining a calm that felt like it came from someone else. "I just want to make one thing clear," I said, my voice steady but firm. "In 9 minutes, HYDRONEXUS will go offline. Every single operation we run, every client we service, it'll all grind to a halt." Gasps filled the room, but I wasn't done. I embedded a security protocol into the system. If my credentials are removed, the platform locks itself down to protect against external threats. This is your breach. The room went still. I didn't care. I had nothing left to lose. I'd built this company from the ground up, and now they were throwing me away like trash. I picked up the envelope with all the grace I could muster, turned on my heel, and walked toward the door. Behind me, the executives scrambled, already pulling out their phones to assess the damage. Their panic only fueled the satisfaction I felt in my chest. As I reached the door, I heard someone shout my name. It was Crow. He was trying to regain control, to salvage what was left of the situation. But I didn't stop. I wasn't going to stick around and let them beg me to come back. They'd never appreciated what I'd done for them, and now they'd realized just how much they depended on me. The door clicked shut behind me. The elevator ride down to the lobby felt surreal. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, steady and strong, as the weight of the decision settled into my bones. I had done it. I had walked out, and they would be left with the mess. I didn't even feel the anger, just a cold, calculating relief. Crow thought he could get rid of me like a bad habit, but he had no idea who he was dealing with. When they came crawling back, and they would, I would make sure they understood exactly who held all the cards. I still remember the day I walked into Aquaterra Solutions for the first time. The company was housed in a converted car wash. Flimsy walls, flickering lights, and barely enough space for everyone. There was a certain raw energy in the air, though. You could feel the potential, the hunger to make something of themselves. I joined as a junior architect, eager to help build the platform that would someday revolutionize water grid systems. At the start, I was part of the team. My ideas were valued. My work was noticed. Benjamin Crow, our CEO, would sing my praises during meetings. He called me the architect of Aquaterra's future. It felt like a dream. There was no ceiling in sight. I was integral to the vision, the driving force behind HYDRONEXUS, our flagship hydrogrid control platform. The company thrived, and so did I. The power behind that platform was all mine, every line of code, every system integration. But things started to shift. About 6 months ago, I noticed it. Subtle but unmistakable. The nods I used to receive turned into half-hearted acknowledgement. I began seeing new faces sitting in on our strategy meetings. Young, eager, fresh out of college. One of them even asked me in front of the team if I needed help with my tasks. It was a question laced with condescension, wrapped in the guise of concern. I could feel the undertone. It was no longer just about the system. It was about me. I dismissed it at first. Thought maybe I was being paranoid. But then one afternoon, while grabbing coffee in the break room, I saw something that made my blood run cold. There, on the communal printer, was an unsigned job offer. It was for my role, my position. But this time, it wasn't for me. It was for a cheaper, inexperienced recruit. The offer was just sitting there, like an innocent mistake. But I knew better. They were already preparing for the day I was no longer needed. They were erasing me, one document at a time. My anger was palpable. But I knew I couldn't just confront Crow. He'd never take me seriously. I wasn't just operations, as they'd started to treat me. I was the architect, the very foundation of everything they'd built. I wasn't going to let them forget that. That night, I embedded a failsafe into the HYDRONEXUS system. I'd been thinking about it for weeks, knowing that if they ever tried to get rid of me, they'd need to understand just how much I controlled. If my credentials were removed or tampered with, the system would assume a breach, and it would lock itself down, cutting off every critical function. HYDRONEXUS would be nothing more than a pile of useless code, leaving Aquaterra with nothing. It wasn't a decision I took lightly, but it was a necessary one. They thought they could push me aside, pretend I was just another cog in the machine. But I was the one who had built that machine. Without me, it would fall apart. The system I created, my lifeblood, was now its own protector, a force they couldn't control. If they decided to discard me, they'd quickly see how indispensable I truly was. The failsafe was in place, and now all I had to do was wait. The countdown had begun. It was late afternoon when the doorbell rang. I had spent the past few hours pacing the apartment, considering my next move. The company was a wreck without HYDRONEXUS, and I knew they'd be scrambling. Part of me wanted to savor the moment, to let them stew in the mess they'd created. But then I heard the knock, and I knew it was time. I opened the door to find Elena, the COO, and Victor, the CTO. They looked like they hadn't slept in days, suits disheveled, eyes red-rimmed, faces drawn. The panic was palpable. "Claudia," Elena started, her voice tight, almost pleading. "We need your help." Victor shifted uncomfortably next to her, clearly unsure of how to approach. "This isn't what we intended," he said, running a hand through his hair. "We never thought it would get this bad." I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. I didn't let them in. Let them feel the weight of their desperation. "I'm sorry," I said coolly, watching them squirm. "I'm not sure I understand. You wanted to fire me, but now you need my help?" Elena took a step forward, trying to steady herself. We didn't have a choice. You didn't give us one." She paused. "Please, Claudia, we're losing everything. The system's down, and the clients are furious. If you don't help us..." I let her words hang in the air, cutting off her pleas before she could finish. "You thought I was just operations," I said softly. "You thought I was just someone behind a desk, pushing buttons, but I'm the one who built this. And now you need me." There it was, the truth, plain as day. They hadn't realized just how deep my involvement went. They thought that by getting rid of me, the system would continue on without a hitch. They had no idea how wrong they were. Victor tried again, stepping into the conversation. "We can't fix this without you, Claudia. We need you to restore HYDRONEXUS, please. The whole company depends on it." I allowed myself a small smile. They weren't just asking for help anymore. They were begging, but I wasn't going to make this easy. Not for them. Not for Crow. "You want HYDRONEXUS back up and running?" I asked, watching them both nod eagerly. "It's simple, but I'll need something in return." They exchanged a look, as if they were bracing themselves for a hard negotiation. "Anything," Elena said, her voice barely a whisper. I stepped aside, motioning for them to come in, but I wasn't done. "I want full reinstatement," I said as they entered, taking a seat on the couch. "An executive role, full equity in the company, and formal recognition of my patents." Victor opened his mouth to protest, but I raised my hand, silencing him. "And one more thing," I continued. "A public apology. Crow and the board need to announce to the company that I'm the reason they still have a company." They were silent for a moment, the reality of what I was asking settling in. Elena looked like she might argue, but Victor nodded. "We'll take it to the board," he said, his voice resigned. "But you need to know they won't like it. Crow won't." "Then they'll have to learn," I interrupted. "You brought this on yourselves. The system is locked down, and it will stay locked until my terms are met." It was a game now, a slow, careful game, but I held all the pieces. Without me, they were nothing. I didn't need to say it out loud, The silence spoke volumes. Elena and Victor exchanged another look, this time one of reluctant understanding. They knew I had them cornered. "We'll do it," Elena said finally, defeated. "We don't have a choice." I nodded once, satisfied. "Good. Now, go back and tell Crow that the clock's ticking. The longer he waits, the more this company loses." With that, I showed them out. As the door clicked shut behind them, I leaned against the frame, a small smile tugging at my lips. The game had begun, and I was in control. The door slammed open, and in walked Benjamin Crow, his face twisted with frustration, his suit wrinkled, and his eyes wide with panic. He was sweating, almost frantic, but he still tried to hold on to some semblance of control. I couldn't help but notice how ridiculous he looked. "Claudia," his voice was sharp, commanding, but it lacked the usual authority. "What the hell have you done? You think this is funny?" I didn't respond immediately. I let him stew for a moment, letting the silence fill the room. My apartment had never seemed so large. "You've completely destroyed everything," he continued, stepping closer, his voice rising. "Do you have any idea what this is costing us?" I remained seated on the couch, my eyes calm, my hands folded neatly in front of me. I knew exactly what was coming next, the accusations, the threats, but I wasn't intimidated, not anymore. "Sit down, Benjamin," I said calmly, almost amused by the contrast between his anger and my calmness. "We're going to have a conversation, but you're going to hear me out." For a moment, he just stared at me, as though he couldn't quite believe what I'd said. But he did sit down, tension still radiating off of him, his body stiff. "You think you can just walk away from all this?" Crow spat, leaning forward. "You're sabotaging us. You've cost Aquaterra millions. Lawsuits are already piling up. Clients are abandoning us." I nodded slowly, taking in his words. "That's because you didn't take me seriously, Ben. I wasn't just an operations manager. I wasn't just a cog in the machine. I built the machine, and you pulled me out of it. So now, the machine has shut down." His face twisted with disbelief. "You did this on purpose? You're a traitor." I leaned forward, locking eyes with him. "What I did was legal. It was a fail-safe I put in place to protect HYDRONEXUS from exactly this situation. A hostile takeover. And guess what? I'm the only one who can unlock it. But here's the kicker. You'll have to meet my terms first." He laughed bitterly, shaking his head. "You think I'm just going to bend to your demands? I'm the CEO. You can't control me," I smiled, my expression cold. "You're not in control anymore, Benjamin. You're in my world now. You've made your bed. Now you'll lie in it." He bristled, but I could see the fear in his eyes. He knew it. The company was spiraling, and he couldn't fix it without me. I had them cornered. I could feel the power shift in the room, and I wasn't about to let it go. "If you want the system back up and running, if you want to stop this disaster from escalating," I continued, my voice steady, "here's what I want. First, I want full reinstatement. I'm not coming back as a consultant or a lowly employee. I want my old position, and I want more power. I want equity in Aquaterra. Full ownership, not just a token share. And I want you to publicly apologize. Not just to me, but to the entire company. You've humiliated me for the last time." He opened his mouth to argue, but I raised my hand. "And one more thing, Benjamin," I added. "I want recognition for my patents. Every single one of them. They're mine. Not yours. Not the company's. They're mine." Crow leaned back in his chair, his eyes flicking between me and the papers on the table, which I knew were filled with projections of the company's financial ruin. He was defeated. I could see it in his face. He couldn't argue. Not anymore. "You're insane," he muttered, barely above a whisper. "No, Benjamin," I said coolly. "I'm not insane. I'm just taking back what's mine." He ran a hand through his hair, visibly trying to keep his composure. "You know the board won't go for this. You're asking for too much." I smiled. "Then I guess Aquaterra will continue to spiral into oblivion. You know as well as I do that the system's not coming back online unless my credentials are restored. You'll never be able to run this company without me. Not anymore." There was a long silence between us, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Crow finally slumped in his chair, his resistance gone. "Fine," he said, his voice strained. "I'll get the papers drafted, but you're pushing it. I stood up and walked to the window, watching the city below. Make sure they're signed, Benjamin, and I want it all in writing. No more games. I could hear his footsteps behind me, but I didn't turn around. He had no power anymore. Not over me, and certainly not over Aquaterra. I'll sign, he muttered, his voice barely audible. I nodded without looking at him. Good. Now go. Get it done. And just like that, the foundation of Aquaterra was shifting. What they had taken from me, what they thought they could erase, I was taking it all back. On my terms. The next morning, I walked into Aquaterra Solutions, not as an employee, but as a partner, an investor, and an executive. The walls seemed a little more imposing now, the glass windows reflecting my newfound power. I was no longer just the architect of their success. Now, I was about to take back what was rightfully mine. I walked past the reception area, where familiar faces barely registered my presence. They had no idea what was about to unfold. Crow's absence was already being felt throughout the company, but no one had yet grasped the full extent of my control over HYDRONEXUS. The boardroom was unusually silent when I entered. I had requested a meeting with the board, and they were waiting for me. Most of them were avoiding eye contact, their unease palpable. They all knew I had the upper hand. I had already exposed Crow's failings. I had the power to dismantle everything they had worked for. As I sat at the head of the table, I glanced at the familiar faces of the executives, the very people who had stood by, complicit in my removal, watching me walk out the door in disgrace. I had no intention of letting them off easy. I'm sure you're all wondering how we got here, I began, my voice calm but unwavering. How a company built on innovation and trust could suddenly be in chaos. The answer is simple. You let Benjamin Crow lead you into this mess. His greed and mismanagement have cost Aquaterra dearly. I clicked a button on the remote, and a screen came to life behind me. It displayed the metrics I had gathered: client complaints, system errors, downtime reports, and most importantly, the unauthorized midnight access Crow had made to HYDRONEXUS just days before my dismissal. The company is crumbling, and I have the proof, I continued, letting the weight of the data settle in. This audit shows that Crow was actively attempting to sabotage the system he promised would lead Aquaterra into its future. HYDRONEXUS was the backbone of this company, and he tried to destroy it from the inside. I could feel their eyes on me, the tension building. They were starting to see what I had uncovered. I know it's difficult to accept, I said, but the time has come for the board to act. I'll be restoring full functionality to HYDRONEXUS today, but not without a price. I'm invoking shareholder clauses, which will force a vote on Crow's immediate removal. There was a moment of silence as the board members exchanged uncertain glances. I wasn't asking for permission. I was informing them of what would happen next. I expect this vote to go in my favor, I said flatly. If not, well, let's just say the company won't survive long enough to find another CEO. One by one, the board members hesitated before turning to one another. They understood now that this wasn't a negotiation, it was a matter of survival. Elena, the COO, shifted uneasily in her seat. Claudia, you've made your point, but are you sure about this? The company can't afford another leadership change. We need stability. I leaned forward, my gaze sharp. I am stability. I built this company. Without me, it will continue to spiral. You saw it in real time when HYDRONEXUS went down. I will fix it, but only on my terms. There was no turning back now. They saw the power I held, and their compliance was inevitable. We're ready, Victor, the CTO said reluctantly. He was the first to give in. We'll vote to remove Crow, but you need to guarantee HYDRONEXUS is restored immediately. I smiled, a sense of satisfaction bubbling up. That's the least of your worries. I'll bring it back online, and I'll make sure the company thrives under my leadership. But it starts today. Crow is out, and the future of Aquaterra is in my hands. A vote was called, and it didn't take long for the board to realize that their survival was tied to my success. They voted unanimously to remove Benjamin Crow from his position. The boardroom was silent as the decision was made official, but I knew the real work had just begun. This wasn't just about restoring a company. It was about taking my rightful place at the top. As I left the room, I knew that Aquaterra was mine to rebuild, mine to shape. Crow had made a fatal mistake, and I would make sure he paid for it. The news spread like wildfire through Aquaterra Solutions. Crow was out, and Claudia was back in. The whispers started the moment the vote was cast, but by the time the official announcement went out, the company was buzzing with a mix of fear and anticipation. I didn't waste any time basking in the glory. I had a job to do. The collapse had been swift, but now I was tasked with rebuilding it. And that's exactly what I did. I gathered key teams, engineering, operations, legal, and we dove straight into damage control. The first step was stabilizing HYDRONEXUS. There were clients to reassure, projects to salvage, and above all, I needed to prove I was in control. As I sat at the head of the conference table, all eyes on me, I couldn't help but feel a surge of power. I was no longer just part of the company's story. I was the story now. "All right," I said, looking around the room. "We need to move quickly. HYDRONEXUS is down and our clients are panicking. Let's focus on restoring our core functions and making sure we're fully operational by the end of the week. No mistakes." I could feel the tension start to ease as the team moved into action. Engineers jumped into their workstations. IT staff began patching the holes in the system. And the legal team immediately started drafting damage control statements to send to our clients. "How's the client outreach going?" I asked Elena, who had taken charge of the communications. She sighed. Her shoulders visibly relaxed for the first time in days. "Better than expected. Most clients are willing to give us a chance to fix things. But the bigger accounts are on the edge. We need to deliver fast." I nodded. "Keep them updated regularly. Transparency is key right now." The next few hours were a blur. I worked through them, not because I wanted to, but because I had to. The company had been built on the backbone of HYDRONEXUS, and without it, we had nothing. But I knew it wasn't just about fixing the tech. It was about regaining the trust I had lost, not just with the clients, but with the team. They were watching me, waiting to see if I could deliver. As the day wound down, a sense of calm started to settle over the company. HYDRONEXUS was being brought back online, and the immediate damage was under control. But just as I thought we might be on the mend, a single notification popped up on my phone. A cryptic, anonymous message. "Someone wants HYDRONEXUS. Badly." I stared at the screen for a moment. No name, no details, just a veiled threat. It was as if the battle was far from over. The message ended with a line that sent a chill down my spine. "You'll regret not taking the offer." My instincts screamed that this wasn't just some disgruntled ex-employee or a random hacker. This was bigger. Someone was making a play for what I had built, and they were willing to go to any lengths to get it. I put my phone down, eyes narrowed. Aquaterra was back on its feet, but this new threat made it clear. The war had only just begun, and I wasn't going to back down. Not now, not ever. I had rebuilt this empire once, and now I would fight to keep it. It didn't take long for things to get real. I was still processing the fallout from Crow's removal when the first sign of trouble appeared. A subtle ping on the system's back door. Just a blip on the radar. A small ripple in the vast ocean of data. But I knew what it meant. Someone had found the keyhole. They didn't have the key, not yet, but that didn't matter. The breach was imminent. I could feel the weight of it pressing against my chest. "Shut it down, now," I barked to the team, monitoring the system. My voice, usually calm, had a steel edge to it. "Initiate full lockdown. Double-check security protocols." I wasn't about to let anyone take what I'd worked so hard to build. Not now. Not when I was just starting to regain control. The room was tense, but I could see my team moving swiftly. They knew the stakes. HYDRONEXUS was the company's heartbeat, and I was its keeper. Without me, this entire system would collapse. As the automated lockdown initiated, the pings turned into sharp, desperate attempts. It was a wave of cyber attacks, port scans, intrusion efforts from all over the globe. This wasn't a single hacker. This was organized. A concerted, well-funded assault. "Activate the AI trace function," I ordered, my fingers flying across the keyboard. "Let's see who's behind this." I pulled up the data, my mind racing. As the traces began to filter through, it didn't take long to identify the source. A server in Zurich. A private investment firm by the name of Corvex Capital. I froze for a moment. Corvex? I'd heard whispers. They had a reputation for aggressive corporate takeovers. But this was different. They weren't just after Aquaterra. They were after HYDRONEXUS itself. The attack wasn't random, it was calculated. And they were targeting me. I opened the system logs further and found what I was looking for, a confidential internal memo from Corvex Capital. My stomach turned as I read the chilling directive: eliminate Claudia, acquire HYDRONEXUS under distress. It wasn't just a hostile takeover they were planning. They wanted me out, and they were willing to do whatever it took to make it happen. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. I wasn't surprised. I knew this wasn't going to be easy, but they had made a critical mistake. They'd underestimated me, just like Crow had. I slammed my hand on the desk. Lock everything down tighter. No one touches HYDRONEXUS unless I say so. And get me everything on Corvex. I want everything. This wasn't just a digital attack anymore. This was corporate warfare, and I had a target on my back. But I had the tools, the power, and most importantly, the knowledge to make sure they regretted every step they took. It was time to fight back, and I wasn't afraid, not anymore. The digital attack had been swift and brutal, but now it was my turn. I wasn't just going to sit back and let these corporate vultures tear apart what I'd built. I was going to hit them where it hurt, and I was going to do it publicly. I had everything I needed: the IP traces, the emails, the attack logs, and most importantly, the internal memo from Corvex Capital. It was damning, clear evidence of their plan to eliminate me and take control of HYDRONEXUS. They thought they could bully me into submission, but they had underestimated how far I was willing to go. With a single click, I launched a three-pronged release. First, I sent it to federal investigators, making sure the full extent of the sabotage was exposed to the highest levels of government. Then I contacted regulatory authorities, ensuring they knew exactly what Corvex had been planning. Finally, I fired off the package to top-tier tech media, ensuring the world would know that HYDRONEXUS wasn't just under attack. It was the target of a hostile corporate raid. It didn't take long before the fallout began. Within hours, the story hit the press, and headlines rolled out across the web. The very people who had tried to destroy me were now the ones being exposed. I wasn't just defending HYDRONEXUS. I was becoming the face of truth, the protector of everything I had built. I sat back, watching as the attack slowed. There was nothing more they could do. The game was over. And just as I expected, my phone buzzed, the same polished voice from the anonymous call earlier. It was like they knew they'd been cornered. "You've made a mistake," the voice said, though this time there was no confidence in it, just cold frustration. "This isn't over," I smiled, leaning back in my chair, unfazed. "It is over. You've been exposed. And now the world knows what you're trying to do. You'll be dealing with the consequences, not me." A long silence followed, before the voice spoke again, quieter now. "We'll see about that. But know this, you haven't won." I hung up, feeling the weight of victory settle in. They were on the defensive now, and I was the one who had the power. As the story continued to spread, the world took notice. Media outlets praised me as both a defender of technology and a whistleblower. My name was no longer just tied to Aquaterra's success. It was tied to the fight for its survival. I knew the battle wasn't over. There would be more challenges, more players trying to take what I had fought for. But in that moment, with the world watching and my position more secure than ever, I knew that no one could erase me now. The day after the headlines hit, the air inside Aquaterra was charged with an energy I hadn't felt in years. News of Crow's removal and my return spread like wildfire. There was a new sense of purpose among the staff, a collective exhale that felt almost like a rebirth. My name wasn't just another employee on the roster anymore. It was etched into every corner of the company, from the coffee machines to the conference rooms. I was not just a founder anymore. I was the defender of everything Aquaterra stood for. I stood in front of the window in my office, looking out over the city skyline. It was beautiful. A reminder of how far we had come, how much we had built, and how much I was about to take back. The world had tried to erase me, Crow, the board, everyone who thought I was just a cog in their machine. But in the end, they only proved how unstoppable I really was. I turned away from the window and looked at the bustling floor below. Engineers and executives worked side by side, restored to their roles, but with a newfound respect. I could see it in their eyes. No one dared to underestimate me now. The team had done an excellent job stabilizing the system. HYDRONEXUS was back online, fully restored. But there was more to do. This wasn't just about patching up the cracks Crow had created. I had to ensure that nothing like this could ever happen again. I walked down to the main floor, a sense of authority now radiating from me. Junior staff and department heads looked up as I passed, some nodding in recognition, others in awe. I'd done what they all thought was impossible, and now I had their loyalty. I called a meeting, and within minutes, the key players were gathered in the sleek boardroom. The air was thick with anticipation as I entered and sat at the head of the table, feeling the weight of my position settle in. "We're not just restoring Aquaterra," I began, my voice steady but powerful. "We're going to reshape it. I'm taking full ownership of my legacy. No more compromises, no more erasure. This company will run on my terms from now on." I paused, letting the words sink in. The room was quiet, everyone was listening. "I've spent years building this. I won't let it fall apart again. I don't care what we've been through. We're going to show the world exactly who Aquaterra is, who we are, and we will not be afraid of taking control." There were no objections, no resistance. My leadership was unquestioned now. The betrayal had been severe, but I was ready to turn it into something stronger, something unbreakable. The next few days flew by as I dove into restructuring Aquaterra's operations. I wasn't just fixing things. I was remaking them, weaving my vision into every fiber of the company's fabric. From investor meetings to internal communications, everything ran through me, and everything was done right. As the news spread, the investment community took notice. My phone buzzed nonstop, emails flooding in from media outlets, industry leaders, and potential investors. Aquaterra was no longer just a company. It was a symbol of resilience and strength. I had ensured that. By the end of the week, the board had formally pledged its allegiance to me, understanding that my vision for the future was the only one that could save Aquaterra. Crow's supporters had long since scattered, and the pieces had fallen into place exactly as I'd planned. I stood at my desk, looking over the final audit of the day's decisions. Every major shareholder was now on my side. The company was in my hands, and nothing could shake that foundation. "They tried to erase me," I whispered to myself, staring at the report. Instead, they proved how unstoppable I really am. And in that moment, I realized the truth. Aquaterra wasn't just mine in name anymore. It was mine in spirit, and no one could take that away from me. I smiled. The world had underestimated me once, but now it was clear. I was the unshakable foundation of everything.